Hello again, I am Safety First Blunty. This is the Mearth S Pro, a new model of electric kick scooter from, predictably enough, Mearth, who are a Sydney-based, I think they describe themselves as a technology company, but mostly they sell different variations of electrified kick scooters for commuting and, well, for funsies, basically. So they sent me this one, their latest, newest, fanciest, shiniest model, as indicated by the Pro in the name. You can always tell when it's fancy when it says Pro, just ask Apple. So I've been kicking about on this, and I'm going to tell you what I think about it. It's kind of the deal. That's why we call it a review. Have I lost anybody yet? I think I lost my train of thought. It has in there a 360 watt motor that'll kick you along at up to 25k an hour. That is a artificial limit set in the software itself. There is apparently a way to work around that, but it's set at that because that complies with the most regulations and guidelines and safety issues and things like that out there in the world. And 25k on something like this, it's fast enough. Average walking space, if you're having a brisk walk, maybe 6k an hour. So even at the the baby mode, because it has 3 different speed modes as well, so even on the learner mode, it's about twice normal walking space to make you feel nice and safe. And by default, it doesn't even engage the motor until you're already on the run. So have you ever seen someone the first time on one of these, where they twist the throttle or activate the throttle and go, whee! Because the motor just kicks off? Well, this can't do that by default. You can switch that off if you don't want it to do that. But by default, you have to be running already, so you have to give it a kick. So you're already in motion, and then when you activate the motor, it's not a big kick. Instead, you go, ooh. So it makes it quite pleasant to start off on, actually, if you're not used to the insta-torque that electric motors on little rides like this can give you. The range, the default battery it comes with, the range is about 40 kilometers, so 20k each way, which is a pretty long ride. I'm not sure whether it measures up to that in the real world, going up and down and all that sort of stuff, but the range has been pretty good so far in my testing. And charge time for the battery is about 3 or 4 hours. So if you do have a particularly long commute, or you want to charge it while you're at the office or wherever you've gone to, in 3 or 4 hours, you can have pretty much an entire top up to make your way back again, which is pretty good. The battery, by the way, is hot swappable. So if you do go on particularly long rides, you can take along a spare battery. They are quite big and not very light, so it's not terribly convenient to do so, but it's nice to know you can do that if you want to do that. And you can charge the battery using the standard charger while it's not connected to the scooter as well. So you can have 2 batteries and cycle through them. Leave one on charge, leave one on the bike, swap them over when you need to. Tire-wise, these are explosion-proof air-filled tyres to help keep you safe and secure and smooth and everything. And they've been performing quite well, actually. They've ridden across lots of different surfaces for me so far. It's been fairly smooth and secure and grippy, and I haven't felt like I've been out of control in any way. That's the fault of the tyres, at least. But as with any vehicle with air-filled tyres, you are probably going to want a puncture kit and a little pump or something to keep spare. None of that comes with it, of course, but I would advise investing in one of those sooner or later, because, well, sooner or later you're going to need one, because, well, nothing's invincible, is it? These are still pretty small by most tyre standards, but they're a lot bigger than standard kick scooters, so that will put up with a lot more terrain. I took it for a ride on this grassy stuff and across tree roots and rocks and stuff, and it's a little scary, but I got it, and I reached the top speed on it stuff, so plenty of power, plenty of ability to absorb that sort of terrain. So if you're not going across perfectly paved streets all the way on your commute, or whatever you're using it for, then not really an issue. It does struggle a bit on inclines, about 10 to 15 degrees, so not a very steep incline, but it will slow right down. So for that kind of stuff, I just sort of stepped off and walked it up the rest of the hill and then went on my merry way. It's, it's not a laziness device as much as it is a time saver. I mean, let's face it, if you were lazy, you'd get a taxi or a train or something. This is just to speed up and make your little trips easier, that sort of last mile trip they talk about. On the back wheel here, you have a nice little disc brake. I think that's very similar to one I've seen on some higher end bicycles. They don't use that sort of clampy little brake there. It sets out, won't stop you dead, quite deliberately, because you don't want to go sailing off the front of this thing. If it stops you dead, you will, because of, well, that's the way physics works. But it is nicely set up to slow you down at a nice even pace, so you can come to a gentle stop and do so quite safely. Also has the standard sort of kick scooter friction brake on the rear, what's the word, fairing, I guess. Fairing, is that right? Is that the right word? Feels like the right word. so you can use those two brakes in combination. It also has regenerative braking. So when you are putting the brake on, it's obviously not using the motor, which is in the front wheel. That's why that front wheel has a sort of fully enclosed hub on it. There's a internal motor in there. But yeah, when you are braking, it goes into regenerative mode and it turns the motor in there into a little bit of a Jenny. So it squirts just a little bit more power back into the battery which sits there on the back of the handlebars. Standard safety features include a slightly emasculating bell, just to let people know you're coming, which is a nice little thing. It's just standard, built right into the handbrake by default. I have to admit I haven't been using them because it does sound, I'm not particularly fragile about my masculinity, but it's not the most, I don't know, it doesn't sing to me. So I normally just call out to people. I do the Avengers thing. On your left. It, of course, like most scooters of its like, has a quick fold functionality. It's going to be a bit tricky to try and do this one-handed and with my non-dominant hand, but there's a little safety latch here. You swipe that out of the way, which releases this latch here, which is the locking latch. And you can release that. From there, the entire thing folds down, and there is a little catching latch right there. So that's what this little hook is for. There we go. So then you can pick the whole thing up. There we go. Weighs about 13.5 kilos, so it's not the lightest thing on the board. You don't want to carry this around very often, but if you do need to carry it up a flight of stairs to your apartment, or if you do need to bring it into the office so it's nice and safe, or you know, when you're recharging it, then you can certainly do that with relative ease. And it folds out just as quickly. So snap that in place, do the latch, do the safety latch. Bob's your uncle. Not that I would particularly recommend riding something like this at night, but it does have a headlight up there, and I do appreciate its positioning, because I've seen on a lot of scooters they put a little front light way down here, which doesn't do you any good as far as other people seeing you, and it sort of limits how much of the road in front of you it can light up. So having it nice and high puts it closer to an easily visible sort of location for other pedestrians and cars and bicyclists and whatnot, and also lights up the road in front of you a little bit better. It also has around the back here a little red flashing light, so when the scooter is on, make sure let's turn it on there, just hold the button down there, so when you squeeze the brake it blinks. Now again, its positioning means it's not particularly useful for visibility's sake. If you're on a bike path and whatnot, that's probably okay, but if you're on sort of regular pathways and streets and whatnot, I would highly suggest you get a flashing red light to put on the back of your helmet, high visibility vest, something like that, because that's not much of a safety feature all the way down here at ground level. Control is very simple. You've got a little hand throttle here. I've got to be careful with that because I've got the instant acceleration turned on. So you've got a power button and a mode button there, and if you double tap that mode button, it'll turn on the light in front there. And it's just a simple thumb throttle, and by default, if you hold it at full throttle and leave it there for a couple of seconds, it's going to beep at you. It goes into cruise control mode, which means you can let go of the throttle and grip the handlebar more securely and just cruise along at a standard stock speed. I've turned that off in the menus because I found it quite annoying at beeping at me. Actually, I want to have full and manual control of my speed at all times, so that is an option as well. Got my battery level there. I'm 2 bars left, so I got to head back home at this point. But also on here, you've got your speed in kilometers an hour. You can set that to miles per hour if you wish. Don't know why you would. But you've also got several different modes here, which put in hard limits to performance. So you can set it to top out at about, I think, 6k an hour, then 10 or 12k an hour, I think it is, or just full speed at 25. You can also unlock this. I don't tell you how to do it in the manual, but if you're resourceful enough, you find out. Unlock a full performance mode where it will go up to 32 kilometers an hour. Don't really recommend that. Not safe, probably outside the regulations of a lot of places. So, but just so you know, 25 is not the fastest it's capable of going, but 25 feels pretty good. It's fast enough to feel very brisk and get you where you need to go, but not so fast that it feels extraordinarily dangerous if you're a little bit experienced on scooters, whether they be electric or otherwise. The deck I quite like as well. It's grippy without being too grippy. It's nice and wide, even for my big hoofs. And there's plenty of space on here for a grown-up to launch both feet. I tend to go front foot pointing forward, back foot just sideways a little bit, because I understand that the quote-unquote proper way is to have both feet pointing forward, but my feet are pretty big and they don't quite fit like that. Plus, I used to ride skateboards, and maybe it's an old habit I picked up from that. Oh, and of course there's a little kickstand here, so you can, as you've been seeing throughout the video, set it up nice and securely on most surfaces, and it seems quite small, but it does the job pretty well. I haven't had it fall over on me yet, so yeah, thumbs up for that, I guess. So, verdict on the Mearth S Pro. I like it. It's fun to ride. It feels stable. It feels robust. It feels decently well built. It's very, very quiet. The battery drains a bit faster than I was expecting, because when you say it has a 40k range, that's in absolutely ideal situation, probably at half speed on perfectly flat, perfectly smooth terrain, perfectly level, all that sort of stuff. But out in the real world, it's significantly less than that. But it still is more than enough, I think, for most people to deal with that sort of last mile kind of situation commuting. So you take the train to somewhere nearby and you do that last little bit to your office or whatever on the scooter, just to make your life a little bit more fun, a little bit more easy, a little bit faster, cut down on that time. And little shopping trips here and there, or in my case, chuck my camera in my bag, zip out on this to a place I normally wouldn't be able to get to particularly easy, especially if I don't want to walk there. So I can just zip there and zip back on this and save myself a bunch of travel time and spend more time shooting than I do traveling. But would I recommend it? Yeah, it's not cheap, but it feels like it's a worthy investment. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart on you. And although, as I said, I'm a bit disappointed in the performance when it comes to the battery life and when it comes to climbing hills, everything else about it is tremendous fun. You just got to be aware of what its limitations are and use it with those in mind, and you'll be perfectly happy skipping about on this thing. So, what do you guys reckon? Have you ever tried an electronic scooter? Leave a comment down below. What one have you tried? What were you happy with? What were you unhappy with? What do you wish would be better? What features do you want to see? I'm curious from experienced users. And if you've never ridden one before, do you want to? What's got you curious about it? What kind of stuff would you do with it? Lots of questions for you. But thank you for watching. I am Blunty. I will catch you next time. And thank you as always to the patrons scrolling up above there. Now, I have used a manual focus lens for the entirety of this 2-camera piece, so hopefully I set the focus correctly. Otherwise, I'll be very frustrated myself.